let's jump into this intro for Rndr and check it out for yourself. Here it basically is. We're going to start with going to the Otoy site. Now, if you're a big fan of Rndr, you already know what I'm talking about. Here it is. And I'll come back into the frame on this one. I think I already am in it. So if you are new to the concept of Rndr or don't know what Rndr is, this is right up your alley. Basically speaking, there's a lot to it when it comes to Rndr. And, back in the days, the early days of like Bitcoin and so on, I mean, it was a big deal to be able to use your graphics card to mine, BTC. But we've come a long way since then. Real-time 3D rendering, the world's first GPU-based physically correct renderer. Now, we're going to show you some demos, live action. I mean, if we're talking about rendering graphics, right, especially when it comes to ray tracing type level material, got to give you some visualization. It's not going to give you everything that's just going to be, hey, here's some articles, right? So they have this real-time capture here. It's a demonstration basically of, what they're capable of doing. But if you're wondering about Rndr, like it says, they are the world's first and fastest unbiased spectrally correct GPU render engine. They deliver quality and speed unrivaled by any production renderer on the market. They're also proud to advance state-of-the-art graphics technologies with groundbreaking machine learning optimizations, out-of-core geometry support, massive 10 to 100x speeds in the scene graph, and RTX ray tracing GPU hardware acceleration. Now, if you're a type person and you don't even know what any of this means, and you're like, what the heck is RTX? What the heck is ray tracing? Ray tracing is an absolute game changer as far as producing realism graphics. And what I mean by that is, and I've used this example in the past, in the year 2001, for instance, there was the movie Pearl Harbor. Now, don't get me wrong, some people don't like the movie Pearl Harbor. They feel as though it was one of Michael Bay's worst films. To each his own. I like it. That's actually my dad's favorite movie, by the way, because he always dreamed of being a fighter pilot when he was younger. But my point is ray tracing technology. That film, Pearl Harbor, is a great example of ray tracing technology. And that technology used to be exclusive to Hollywood only. And it's amazing how we've progressed where these technologies or, regular consumers like us can have, we can have this, right? We can even see it in the video games. We can see it in other types of things. But that movie, Pearl Harbor, right? You really think there's, 300 plus Mitsubishi Japanese Zero fighter planes that are still around? I think there's like maybe one or two in the whole world. How do you create a scene that replicates, right, the attack on Pearl Harbor, for instance, and make it look photorealistic, right? So what you do is you basically take an image of the original plane, if you will, and then you retrace over that image in all sorts of different angles thousands of times. And then by the naked eye, for instance, once that's rendered, it looks photorealistic. Now let's present, of course, Rndr to you. Like, what is this? But my point is, I wanted to give you a kind of an idea of what ray tracing is all about, or RTX. RTX graphics cards are some of the most expensive ones out there on the market, especially if you're a gamer. I want a 4080 GTX, but I mean, that's a very expensive graphics card, right? I would have to do a lot of upgrades, my processor, my RAM, you name it, right? But, they have this thing about what's new in this, and, the connections, obviously, with NVIDIA. You're more than, you can more than take a look more into this. But I want to get to the nitty-gritty of why I'm presenting this to you. And if anything, you can go to their site, which is home.otoy.com, look more into this. But here is the rendernetwork.com site. And in the process of getting to this, I'm going to blow this up a little bit more. And you're going to see some key things here. So for one, it's like, how does this all work, basically? And maybe I went into a little bit too, I don't know, blew it up too much, in which I lost my spot. But I was going to state to you guys is this, I think it's right here. There we go. I'll just keep it on that because I'm going to lose my spot. The Rndr Network, what's it all about? That's the bottom line, right? Well, they did launch back in 2017. They've been around, right? I mean, you think about your Ripples and so on, right? Been around a long time as well. But Rndr Network provides unlimited decentralized GPU computing power for the next generation of 3D content creation. They're also the first decentralized GPU renting platform. They empower artists to scale, and I like the terms here, GPU. And by the way, you're going to see an example from their founder / CEO. He's going to talk about this in a bit. But the point is to be able to scale GPU rendering work on demand to high performance GPU nodes around the world. How is that going to be done? Through blockchain, right? Through a marketplace, right? For idle GPU computation. So it's not like, some other mining solutions that have been out there in the past where you are literally stress testing to the max of what your GPU, as in graphics processing unit, right, graphics card can do. You could actually do a lot of this stuff in idle, and that's very appealing to somebody that doesn't want to, for instance, shell out good money for like an RTX graphics card. They're very expensive, anywhere from $2,000 to $4,000 or more just for the graphics card, and then have it be stress tested, if you will, 24/7. Right? A lot of people are not necessarily wanting to sign that up. You got to have a good incentive for them to do that. Again, enter in Rndr, right? If you can do anything on idle, think about right now, like my computer's on idle. I'm only using maybe 2 or 3% of my CPU and stuff like that. That's not much. So what is this about? At the end of the day, why should you look more into Rndr? And that's what I would be asking if I was a person like you on the show. Now, what I want to show you guys is this in regards to the CMC listing. The reason why this is important, and I'm not, going to BS you on any of this. I'm not paid by Rndr or anything like that. It's just something you guys requested a while back. But as far as the nitty gritty, we should all pay attention to opportunities. Again, not financial advice, but the far left on this page is what I want to show you. So currently speaking, Rndr sits at $1.34. Its ticker symbol is RNDR. This is straight from CMC. But the bottom line is what you're going to see here in a bit. And basically speaking, they currently have a ranking on CMC of 63rd overall. So they're in that top 100. They have a market cap of 497 million currently, based off of the current market conditions. We're at 1.04 trillion for the overall crypto market. The volume has been down currently. A lot of things are down, right? Bottom line is this. What is the total supply? What is the max supply? So the max supply on Rndr is only 536 million tokens. And that is significant. A lot of times we cover projects, I should say a lot of times, like all the time, right? Quant, 14 some odd million tokens. Heck, you guys obviously know about BTC, unless you've been living under a rock, right? BTC, a little over 21 million coins, right? So the bottom line is, what stands out for those is scarcity, especially, right? When we talk your ear off about quant, this is not quant. But what I do like is this doesn't have billions or trillions of tokens. So there you go. Max supply, 536 million. Total supply, 530 million, give or take, right? How much is currently in circulation? Great question. 69.27%. So, this is not some brand new project. They didn't come out with, for instance, a bad release where you saw an example of, 1.5 billion tokens, or in this case, 1.5 million tokens, and then the price just tanks. Okay, no, not at all. Currently speaking, if you're looking to get into this, it instills some confidence because you do have a decent amount, more than half of the supply in circulation. Now, getting more into this, if you're wanting some other stats before we get more into the outline, and again, this is just an intro. This is not really a deep dive. It may seem like a deep dive. It is not. This is an intro. What about the performance? How did this do? Because everybody's wondering about that, right? So all-time highs was November 21st, 2021, towards the end of last, bull market, if you will, $8.76. It's basically been down about 85% since then. A lot of projects have been, that or higher, right? 90, 95, in the case of JASMY, 99%, stuff like that. What about all-time lows, right? June 16th, 2020, 3 years ago. Look at that. It was all the way down to 0.03676. So for people that got in then, man, they did more than well. Where can you get this? And don't get me wrong, we'll get more into the outline of what we have. You can get it on a lot of different exchanges. You get it off of Binance, you get it off of Coinbase. If you're outside the United States, you can get it on KuCoin, Kraken. There's a bunch, right? What about, instead of centralized, what about decentralized? Absolutely. Uniswap, QuickSwap, Balancer, Open Ocean. What else is there? SushiSwap. Okay. So it's on a lot of different exchanges, centralized and decentralized. Now, getting more into this, I want to share with you guys this right here. And basically speaking, we always talk about the concept of the metaverse, okay? Everybody wants to know about the metaverse. People like talking about the metaverse. They like talking about, all these what if scenarios. Is it more to it than just gaming? Absolutely, right? We talk about especially JASMY with the educational side of what they're going to bring to the metaverse. But this is Rndr. What exactly stands out for them, what they can contribute to the metaverse, and what could it mean to you as an investor? That's a great question. So if anything, we're going to show you this video. We're going to show you some other videos. This one's about roughly 4 minutes and 20 seconds, and it's from Jules Urbach. States rendering the metaverse. Let's go ahead and play this. Please smash that like, and thank you for being here for TGIF with Max, but not just with me, our wonderful community that we have here tonight. Here we go.
It was 1983 when I first saw Dragon's Lair, which totally changed my life. And it came out at a time when you had things like Pac-Man. But the difference was you're watching a Disney movie that was beautifully rendered. I mean, in fact, there was nothing better visually that I could have imagined. There's a joystick and a button, so it gave me agency to actually control what I was seeing. It gave me a really interesting insight. You have every single possible thing ever rendered stored on a disk, and you can actually just use the controller to blow those up. That could actually give you everything you want. That is something that informed a lot of the innovations and ideas that led to me creating Otoy. Otoy is working on making holographic reality from the cloud practical and possible in anybody's hands.
If you've seen some of Otoy's work, they have some the things that show off ray tracing, semi-transparent stuff, reflections, and those are literally the best images I have ever seen through any VR headset anywhere.
Otoy's role is to actually figure out the equivalent of the web or the metaverse and provide everything that somebody can need to sort of create and imagine what they want. Today, we have this holographic technology, which is all about the efficient ways of pre-rendering every possible viewpoint, every way that light can interact and change, and giving you the agency to look around that, to mix that, to interact with it. Ultimately, a creator should be able to say, I have an idea where a truck is going through a forest and I want the sun to be here. There's going to be a point where you're not going to have a wand or a mouse that does this. You're going to think about it and it's going to happen. The cloud is also another important aspect of it, because I don't feel that there needs to be a physical computer or device. The idea of this sort of metaverse is sort of an ethereal concept. The glasses that we're working with, these ODG glasses, allowed us to experiment with something that I've never seen in any other device. Sure, they're a pair of sunglasses where they have that form factor and you can see the world around you, but we actually can filter that. So we can actually turn them into VR glasses just by changing all the pixels to black, and all of a sudden you're in a black room, or we can cast a shadow on the ground, or we can block out the sun and change the entire color temperature of the room. And those are actually really important cues that without that, we will never get the eye to feel like they're actually looking at mixed reality. Rndr the Metaverse was a joint project that we did with Oculus, and it was amazing. So the idea of Rndr the Metaverse was to give every single person get a free version of Octane, and to let them just create anything they wanted, and every month Oculus would sponsor a reward. We ended up seeing thousands of these beautiful renders. They were just wild. I mean, it was absolutely mind-blowing. It's not just the visual fidelity and quality that Octane provided that's beautiful, it's that we actually could see people's imaginations at work. For me, it was one of the first times through this contest, Rndr the Metaverse, that I felt like this is it. This is what Otoy really is about. There's a part of me that really never grew up, and I was always in this mindset of searching and yearning for things that, I don't know, that would just allow me to explore my mind, and that the way that I imagine stories being told with our tools, and the ultimate endpoint is very much the way that children tell stories when they're playing with toys and they're actually doing things together. Every single person should have agency to create. And I feel if we do our jobs right, everyone with an idea is going to be able to render things. There won't be a learning curve because, frankly, the way that I think was always idea-based. I mean, I had a concept in my mind, maybe it was innovative, but then I had to go learn how to code it, and then I had to figure out the technology. And what if, none of that was necessary? Every child with an idea could actually change the world. That would be something amazing. And, if Otoy actually fulfills this mission, that will be possible.
All right, so that's just one of a few things that we're obviously going to share with you guys tonight. Let me show you guys just a little bit more in that regard. Give me just a second. So I'm going to pull this up because for some reason it's kind of weird when I refresh the screen. All right, so I'm going to share this with you, and before we get into the next part of what we have, and one thing I love about this intro to Rndr is the visualizations. I mean, if I'm talking about something in regards to an actual graphics card, or using a GPU to render this, no pun intended, shouldn't I have a lot of visuals for you guys? Yeah, absolutely, right? So let's jump back into this. This is straight from the Rndr network, and we're gonna pull this up in a way, of course, you can see this a little bit better, because I mean, why wouldn't we? All right, so here it is. Here's this guy that you just literally saw. And bottom line is, what is specifically this network, the Rndr network? So for one, excuse me, the Rndr network is a high-performance distributed GPU rendering network that leverages industry-leading Otoy, like you saw that he mentioned in that video. He was talking about Dragon's Lair and so on. I did play that back in the day, right? Early 90s and so on. It was just, you wanted to play something that had some cool graphics or literally looked like you're playing a movie. Got kind of frustrating, but teach his own. But yes, industry-leading Otoy. It's software to facilitate a compute marketplace between GPU providers and GPU requesters. We're always talking about marketplaces, decentralized marketplaces, right? So this again is Jules Urbach. This is another particular video. This one's only about 2 minutes and 25 seconds. And then we'll get into the part below it. It's very educational. You might not even be aware of this if you are a Rndr investor. But again, for a lot of you new people and so on who don't know about it or might have possibly heard about it, this is a pretty decent intro for you. So I hope you enjoy it, especially on this Friday night. Here we go. Please smash that like. Let's play it.
Hi, this is Jules Urbach, CEO of Otoy. Otoy's been at the forefront of GPU rendering for almost a decade now. Our product, Octane Rndr, was one of the first GPU renders to provide cinematic realism to film jobs and television. Today, it's used in productions like the opening of Westworld, and it's also now a big part of video game development, especially for AR and VR. Octane is a very special GPU software. There's really no limit to the amount of compute power and render power that you can throw behind a render job with our software. Our idea is that at a certain point, scaling GPU rendering power is too difficult. Rendering locally on a network and even in the cloud just hit a wall. It's impossible to leverage all of the GPUs in the world efficiently without some sort of decentralized system that allows that to be tracked and managed. Today, we're very proud to introduce the Rndr token, which is a ERC20 token that's based on the Ethereum blockchain. This token will allow anyone to participate in render jobs and be rewarded with render tokens that they can cash in. Everyone creating renders and creating content through this system has authorship and chain of title established on the blockchain permanently. Our goal is not only to create a distributed peer-to-peer network of unlimited rendering power, but also to have a marketplace where services and assets and even modules built on the rendering network can be distributed and shared and monetized by everyone. There's nothing that's going to be rendered through the Rndr token that isn't coming from artistic or creative intent. That's the whole point of the service. So there's a lot that can be done beyond just creating great artwork and media or even video games with this technology. There's scientific simulations, light leaking simulations for architecture that can be built inside of the rendering system. And this means that you can actually perform render jobs that are useful for the sciences and for research and get rewarded at the same time. This is a great use of the blockchain and of everyone's GPU power. Our vision as a company has been to democratize compute and rendering power, and this is one of the best ways to do it. Please visit us for more progress updates on rendrtoken.com and on our social media links below. We're incredibly excited about this service, and we hope you are too. Thank you so much. This is Jules Urbach signing off.
All right, another really cool thing to show you guys, obviously. Just going to go ahead and refresh this. There's a little bit more to this, obviously, and maybe at this point you do feel as though it's a deep dive, but in reality, when I do an intro, you got to keep in mind, intros are kind of like just how they should sound. I mean, hey, here's what it is. And nothing really too new in regards to like for you guys that are already invested into Rndr. But yeah, later on we could do some deep dives, stuff like that. And at the end of this segment, I will give you guys a little bit more of that detailed information or news that just dropped not that long ago. All right, so we're gonna get more into this. I'm gonna share some of this with you guys right now. And again, straight from the no.render network. Were you aware that this was first conceived all the way back in 2009? This founder that you've seen twice now in regards to these video presentations, Jules Urbach of the Rndr network, held his first public token sale all the way back in October of 2017. So again, some of that confidence of like, is this going to be a project that's just going to go away anytime soon? I don't think so. When we talk about 99% of cryptos are going to go away, I don't think Rndr is going to be one of those ones that's going to go away. And if I'm an investor, that's what I want to hear, right? My hard-earned money, don't want it to go into something that's going to be garbage. During the private sale, early adopters were onboarded onto the Rndr beta testnet. Basically speaking, that's when beta node operators and beta creators work together with the Rndr network team to build out and test the network. Rndr network launched publicly all the way back in 2020. So you think about it, they had basically a good solid 3-year run of testing. And, you guys know some of my background. Like, actually, today was the first day I played a video game since last January, right? But, I've always been a hardcore gamer. So, like, a lot of these things that you see mentioned and so on, especially when you reference, like, Dragon's Lair and some other, video games, and talked about, for instance, what these technologies contribute to big, productions. It's like right up my alley. And so my thing is this, right? Any solid or decent game, especially a AAA game, you're looking at 1 to 2 years in regards to development. Well, if they went literally a 3-year time period to go, create this beta testnet, they were focused on creating a quality product or a quality network. And that earned my respect right there. They didn't just do it for like 3 months or 6 months. No, they wanted to work everything out. And you know what? I think a lot of people have recognized that. And I have seen on crypto Twitter, people talk about that and referencing that a lot. All right, a little bit more about this. Who are they backed by, right? So Rndr, of course, backed by Otoy. You saw the presentation from him in that regard. It says, for instance, the Rndr network team is based out of LA, is in Los Angeles, with team members located all over the globe. I mean, that's to be expected, right? We live in a day and time where, basically speaking, everybody works remotely, right? Especially after the pandemic. With a world-class advisory board boasting industry leaders such as Ari Emanuel, who is the co-founder and co-CEO, and I have a little piece from him towards the end of this, segment, if you will. But here's a big, big name that everybody knows about, right? J.J. Abrams. You know, let's face it. I mean, you ever watch Lost back in the day? Obviously, you know, not just it don't just end there, right? I mean, we're talking big Hollywood productions, especially if you're into, um, was it the first Star Wars or not the first Star Wars, the first sequel of the sequel trilogy? You know, Force Awakens. Obviously, what he did, I guess, with Star Trek and so on. So my point is like some big, big names, right? J.J. Abrams is a big name. Obviously, some of these other ones are big names as well, but these names stand out. And basically, like it says, Rndr Network aims to bridge the gap between the graphics in present and the virtual future. So when we talk about the metaverse and what ones can stand out, I think we have to include Rndr in regards to that, right? So he has this other one. This one's good as well. And it says, how does a Rndr network basically work? And you may feel as though this is a little bit of reiteration. It's not. I already went ahead and review this. But again, these visuals. So we're going to play this as well. And then we have a little bit more. And then we'll get into some of that recent news to share with you guys who might not just want to hear the intro to Rndr, but want to be caught more up on some of the recent news. So we got a little bit of both. Please smash that like. And here you go. A little bit more from Rndr.
Hi, this is Jules Urbach, CEO and co-founder of Otoy. I want to talk about our roadmap for the Rndr network that we're building following the token launch. So the Rndr network is going to do something that's never been achievable before. It's a really novel approach to cryptocurrency and the blockchain, built on ultimately the value of rendering cinematic assets and virtual reality and holographic content. We feel that the Rndr token is a fundamental unit of currency that's going to be used everywhere throughout immersive computing and rendering in the decades to come. Traditionally, computing power, especially GPU computing power, has been centralized on the cloud or limited to a couple of nodes that you have in your office. We've actually come to the point where we don't have enough GPUs. The kinds of jobs that our users and customers are starting to do that are focused on VR and AR are tapping into huge dimensions of rendering power where the real world and the synthetic world need to match perfectly. And these jobs map to 100 times more compute power and raise than traditional movies and video game lighting required in the past. So we see the utility of the Rndr network expanding what the cloud computing ecosystem of today offers in the era of AR, VR, and holographic content. One of the things that makes the Rndr network possible is that the rendering that we're doing is essentially split from the application that is used to create it. The flow of Rndr tokens go from the user or artist creating a render job to the node with users in charge of processing that specific render job. Once the job has been verified and finished through our ecosystem, the render information is sent back across the network to the original user. Everyone that contributes to that rendering power, unlike a centralized cloud service like Amazon or Google or Azure, will participate in the value and the rewards of powering this network of millions of GPUs. The Rndr token network will also introduce a really important concept that's missing from current media and publishing pipelines, and that is creating a chain of authorship from the inception of a piece of artwork or content, including mapping multiple authors, multiple contributors into the content itself as it gets created. This is more powerful than watermarks and DRM because it ensures that the use of these assets and their value themselves are part of the blockchain and therefore validated in every possible way that is meaningful in this ecosystem. Every single asset that goes through the system is converted into a standard photon-based metric that content creators, even in combination, can assign value that flows back to them when it's used or rendered. And through other tokens, like the basic attention token, you can actually have photons mapped to ad dollars. And these kinds of networks, both inside of the Rndr token system and other cryptocurrency networks, these are the computing primitives and the economy of the future. For art, for services, for knowledge, things that we can barely imagine today, the way that the pre-web world did not imagine the decentralization of compute and information in the early 90s. Please track our progress, check our social media accounts at Rndr Token, and follow us on Rocket Chat and Reddit. We're very excited to complete these next steps and to have you be part of this amazing future that we're all trying to build. Thank you so much. This is Jules Urbach, signing off.
All right. So, I mean, that's a while back, but I mean, one thing that you've seen consistently on all three of these videos that we've shown you so far, I don't know about you guys. Well, I should say, I know about you guys. I think, especially with the community we have here, you guys can get a good sense if a person's sincere and they're honest. This guy comes, I'm just going to be honest, to me, comes off sincere. And another thing I really like about how he explains things, he's very passionate about this with Rndr. Those two things are really, really cool. I mean, let's face it, right? A lot of us have kids. Some of you guys have grandkids and so on. Maybe it's hard for you to basically explain different types of cryptocurrency projects or blockchain projects, distributed ledger technologies, and some of it just kind of sounds boring to a kid. All right, let's just be honest about that. We could talk about, hey, BTC was $69,000 and so on. To a kid, okay, cool. Hey, who doesn't want to be rich? But when you can identify with your children or grandchildren or whoever, right, and be able to show them something super cool that puts them on the same level as you, like I said, what's the connector here? What's the common thing that we can, look at and be excited about? You get that, right? Being able to show, our youth something like this and say, hey, look at this and look what they've done. And, for all we know, I mean, the kid recognizes nothing that was presented, but he sees a name like J.J. Abrams. Oh, I love, The Force Awakens, or some of these other big Hollywood budgeted movies, or some of these video games, obviously, and they're aspiring to be a future graphic artist and stuff like that, right? Again, you can see the level of passion, and you know what? That's a cool thing. At the end of the day, our platform is an educational platform. It's not just about news and so on. You guys know I'm a former teacher, not this year, but in the past and so on. And I love to educate. I love to share things. I love to connect things, right? And I was like, you know what? I think this is now the time to finally introduce Rndr. Now, before we wrap things up with Rndr, I want to share a little bit more of what we have for you guys. And if anything, give you a little more of that education, just in case you didn't know everything there is to know about Rndr. So please smash that like. Let's get into a little bit more of what we have in regards to Rndr. And if anything, I'm going to refresh the screen real quick. I'm going to pull this up. And basically speaking, there's just so much in that regards to mention. So I'm going to do about maybe 2 to 3 more things in regards to Rndr. And we talked about the metaverse. Everybody's consistently talking about the metaverse, and it's like a lot of times it feels, people feel as though like these are like virtual ghost towns, right? They're not that. It's not that they're virtual ghost towns. It's just that they're not fully completed, right? I mean, the way I look at the metaverse is kind of like, the way I look at like a subdivision or, cruising down the street in my 6 Fall. Anyway, cruising down the street and, there's a certain area of town that's being developed and so on. Kind of look at the metaverse at that. It's like, you know what? It's not that this is abandoned. This is just not fully incorporated yet, right? So what about this in regards to just that, rendering the metaverse? Check this out. So number one, it has this whole inspiration by the book Life After Television. Were you aware that this was written all the way back in 1990 by who? Otoy advisor board member George Gilder. Now, Jules Urbach laid out his vision for the future in life after automation, the rendering economy. And this is a cool little segment. It doesn't have visualization, but I'm going to get right to it. So for one, in this quote, it says, a first principle in the render economy is that the resonance of authentic human thought, creativity, and imagination are the fundamental units of currency. I mean, we are talking about cryptocurrency, are we not? Our complete personal experience is a uniquely human metric by which we constantly measure qualia, what a name, or what a word, social resonance, not pronounce that right, and novel truths. No machine can ever do this more authentically and meaningfully than we do. Now, we talk about supply and demand. That's the bottom line. You can be investing in stocks, you could be investing in crypto, you could be investing in anything. Is there any supply and demand for that specific product or service? Well, again, if you got this with Rndr, where they can basically do something that's so meaningful and better than, I guess, anything else out there, I want to pay attention to that. And if anything, I might finally get into Rndr, right? Hear me out. In a decentralized, dematerialized, and fully automated world, the flow and final evaluation of human value must never stop being a human responsibility. Now, where does the Rndr token come into play? Check this out. The Rndr token and the network that it encompasses are basically built to enable such a system's viability as early as possible. First, the thought, or through, I should say, massive cost savings in distributed rendering that bootstraps the Rndr economy in its early stages. Then in subsequent phases to come, through a semantic web of value and authorship encoded in the blockchain itself. There's obviously a lot more to this and so on, but again, I like how it's worded. And in that video, he also mentioned basic attention token. Now, this is something we don't really talk about much, but every now and then somebody brings up BAT. So, in regards to that, co-creator of basic attention token and JavaScript creator and co-founder of Mozilla, remember Firefox, and also Otoy and Rndr Network Advisory Board member, man, that's a lot to mention, Brendan Ike, wrote in his blog post, the Rndr token, quote, large shared AR/VR worlds cannot possibly encrypt what you see. As a DRM for fixed media tries to do, yet creators of models and art in such shared virtual worlds need effective and fair protection as experienced from Second Life shows. Now, if you remember, Second Life is a game. I tried it once. I was not a big fan. This whole concept of metaverse is nothing new, right? People have referenced Second Life multiple times. But what's also mentioned is indelible watermarking is a key part of the solution. So here's the thing. Some of you guys have experience with OpenSea and other platforms. And at the end of the day, if you have a very valuable, for instance, NFT, you don't want to get that hijacked by a malicious person who is going to take that and steal a whole bunch of yours and everybody else's work. Well, what about, especially in the metaverse? At the end of the day, metaverse is really going to stand out, especially for digital art galleries, right? We hear about it all the time. This metaverse platform, that one. I've covered Metopolis. We talked about Shiba Inus, Shibbers. There's all sorts of different metaverses. But the key is, displaying that artwork or simply having something that you bought from a digital store inside that metaverse. You don't want somebody to be able to just like quickly jack that and so on. So, Gilbert Verdi in a quant talks about the trust layer and also creating that internet of value. Rndr hits both areas, the security side of that with the watermarking, and especially when it comes to, this want and need of a utilization of being able to, no pun intended, render valuable things that you're going to see, obviously, in the metaverse. Goes on to mention this thing about BAT real quick. He says he's honored to be advisor to Otoy and Rndr. They're thrilled with the prospects for both Rndr and BAT, as in basic attention token, and other domain-specific tokens that will bind the metaverse economy into a coherent and equitable yet decentralized whole. The future will be tokenized. Yeah, we've already seen the future be tokenized. Now, earlier we talked about J.J. Abrams. There's one more reference in regards to him. It says this vision of a truly decentralized and open metaverse is what connected Otoy to many other leaders in the 3D and entertainment industry, including Star Wars director and Otoy and Rndr advisor board member J.J. Abrams. I mean, God, we talk about key partnerships or key people. It's not who you know, not what you know, but who you know. This is the perfect example of that. And here's the quote from J.J. Abrams, and we'll jump into the next thing. As technology continues to become democratized, here at CTM, we always talk about, data democratization, period, especially when it comes to distributed ledger technologies. But again, as technology continues to become democratized, including the sort of remarkable results you can get with Octane, more diverse and unique stories will be told. World familiar and extraordinary will be created and distributed in ways that could not have been imagined a decade ago. Now, another thing I love about this is this. So I will mention these honorable ones, and you may think this has nothing to do with it, but this is a good example. So one key thing that was mentioned from this guy that's from obviously Rndr Network and Otoy, the CEO, if you will, he specifically mentions that like a kid who comes into this whole thing of what Rndr Network provides, and this kid or whoever, doesn't necessarily have to be a kid, doesn't have to learn a bunch of coding. Now, what's one thing we always mention here at CTN? Stellar Network, right? Basically, Sorbonne. Like, you have devs coming over to the network. They don't have to learn all sorts of brand new coding languages. Again, a very attractive network to come on and to build on. We talk about graphic artists. We talk about people who are literally going to want to jump into this. This seems very exciting. They identify, somebody's like, J.J. Abrams and so on. So the point is, again, the ease of use coming into a platform that doesn't require so much lines of code. We talk about Quant Network, Gilbert Vereen talking about 3 lines of code, if that, right? So one consistent thing is distributed ledger technologies, whether it's Quant Network through Overledger, Stellar, for instance, with Sorbonne, and now you have this thing with Rndr. You can understand how it all comes together, because you know what, something, there's going to be ones that really stand out in metaverse. Here is your big one, in my opinion, that stands out in that regard. Now, is this a great investment? I think it could very well be. Is it going to be something that's like a 10 or 100x? That I don't know. But what I do know is if we base things off of the previous all-time highs for Rndr, well, at minimum, I'm looking at like a 10x. Now, is this going to be worth a heck of a lot more than what was in the past? Yes. The way I look at it is a simple yes. And the reason why I want to state that it's a simple yes is because the way I look at it is, do you have fully completed metaverse platforms with mass adoption? Some people will say yes, that exists as we speak. Some people are going to say, you have, for instance, the Sandbox, you have Decentraland. Those are good examples. But when we talk about quality rendered ray tracing, level material, are those big time ray tracing, visuals on your screen, photorealistic images? No, they are not. And I'm not bashing those platforms. I mean, let's face it. We have kids that play, obviously like Roblox, and they play, for instance, Minecraft, and they're cool with those types of graphics. Sometimes at the end of the day, it's not all about graphics, it's about gameplay. But for this platform to have what they got going on, especially this connector to like J.J. Abrams, yeah, ways you couldn't have possibly imagined a decade ago becoming reality now and innovating from there. You have all these other examples about, gaming, virtual reality. I'm very familiar with Quake, Doom. I mean, a lot of us grew up with these games. But the key thing is, these are some big, big names that they are connected to, and some big people that they're connected to. Now, getting into the closing parts of what we have for our long outline at this point, let's face it, it's supposed to be intro. I don't know, maybe we got a bad habit of just doing this. I wanted to bring you this information in regards to something that was reported literally today, September 1st. So it says, did you know Oscar winner John Knoll, creator of Adobe Photoshop, and I use Photoshop, right? I use Photoshop to make my thumbnails that I bring to you guys, and VFX supervisor for ILM on Star Wars, Star Trek, and even Pirates of the Caribbean, was the first Rndr customer. Yeah. I'm not going to make that face. People say, Max, I like you. I'm not making that face. Don't make that face. I'm not going to make the face. There's the face. Throwback to Jules Urbach at Solana Breakpoint 2021. This is only a minute and a half. Please smash that like, especially if you're like, oh yeah, I love me some Rndr. Here we go.
So our very first commercial job on the Rndr network when we launched was John Knoll. He created Photoshop. He's the head of ILM, and he did a job for the Hayden Planetarium on Rndr, and basically was the first person to tell us this product is amazing and we love it.
Welcome back to the Star Wars Show Live. I am joined now by Chief Visual Effects Supervisor and Chief Creative Officer of ILM, Mr. John Knoll. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Super. Yeah.
As other college kids were doing keg stands, one PhD student named Thomas Knoll began writing a program to display grayscale images on a monochrome screen. Meanwhile, his brother, John Knoll, was working at ILM. He realized that digital painting would be the future of visual effects, and he convinced Thomas to turn this idea into a fully fledged image editing program. To Thomas Knoll, John Knoll, and Mark Hamburger, the Academy presents a Scientific and Engineering Award for their work on Adobe Photoshop. Come on up, guys.
Say what you want. It is kind of inspiring, right? You know, and it's cool. You know, a lot of times we present a lot of this stuff. We talk about cross-border payments all the time. We're blue in the face. You know what? We need to have something a little bit different for a change, right? And maybe, if anything, this presentation in regards to Rndr is long overdue. Now, we're almost done in regards to what we have. I want to present to you guys just a little bit more of what we have for you tonight. And on this one, this comes from the same guy, but it's in regards to somebody that you may be familiar with, or maybe not. And I want to share this again in closing with you guys. So basically speaking, this is a quick little segment. And shout out to this guy named Diffusion. He can be followed at Diffusion_X. I think I'll give him a follow because I want to follow a little bit more about Rndr. And I'm just going to throw it out there. I'm probably looking to get into this, not exactly like tomorrow or anything, or today, but there's a few on my short list, and I think Rndr really does stand out. So check this out. The AI compute market will all boil down to tokens per second. We talk about this, you know, TPS, a different form of TPS, right? Transactions per second, but tokens per second? That sounds kind of odd. GPUs, essentially, in the case of Rndr, you're basically displacing an AWS. Well, we all know about Amazon Web Services and so on, but, you know, is this the same thing? Should we just go ahead and play this? Yeah. This guy, of course, says 1,000 plus Rndr is programmed. Like, the crazy things being mentioned, right? To each his own. But there's a real solid opportunity here. I think there is. You know, at the end of the day, there's other opportunities when it comes to blockchain and distributed ledger technologies. It doesn't have to be all strictly, you know, cross-border stuff. We talk about that again till we're blue in the face, and we have. But we should always recognize other opportunities. And a lot of times we've covered other projects, whether it's, you know, tokenization of agriculture with Demotra or Rndr or you name it, right? So I'm glad to kind of get out of the box, if you will, and present to you guys something a little bit different. And of course, you guys have requested this for a while. Let's go ahead and play this, and we'll show you the bottom part, and we'll close this out in regards to our Rndr coverage. Please smash that like. Here we go.
But Chamat is talking about Rndr. Now, listen to the clues here, because you can see that Chamat has a very, very, very deep knowledge of what Rndr does. He doesn't just know the surface level. He actually knows a lot about what Rndr does.
GPUs, essentially. In both of those things, you can quantifiably, economically measure what the value is that people get, right? In the case of Rndr, you're basically displacing an AWS instance. And so that has a price and a value. And so, you know, for Rndr to be valuable, there's an economic value that it replaces.
But Chamat is talking about Rndr. Now,
excuse me. So just real quick, I want to talk about that, right? So bottom line is we talk about a price and a value. What's one thing we always mention with our Ripple XRP coverage? There's got to be a tremendous amount of price and value for what they're doing with these central banks and so on, right? We talk about Stellar, we talk about Quant, all that stuff, right? It has to have a high value, and people who flood it, they don't get it. They didn't do proper research. I'm not looking to day trade some of this stuff. And if I was going to be invested into Rndr, I'm just stating it'll be a long-term buy and hold for me. Now, the final part of what you didn't see at the bottom of the little clip that was shared is basically this, and this will close it out for sure this time. And this is actually from the person you saw interviewed, who is the guy in the guy in that short clip, Chamath. I can't pronounce the last name, but anyway, 1.6 million followers, CEO of Social Capital. Who are they? You know, you may be wondering about. And also, Social Capital, Bestie, the All-In Pod, if you will. But anyway, yes, I mean, I see even Selmo Fudd follows this guy. Shout to Selmo Fudd. Blackwood follows this guy. So, you know, there's quite a few guys who follow this guy. So obviously you're probably Rndr holders, right? Are you not? All right, so check this out. It says, if you were trying to figure out whether to buy NVIDIA or not, consider the blow. Now, I'll be honest, like I should have invested into NVIDIA stock years ago. Not financial advice, but let's just face it, that was a premier stock, and if anything, probably still is going to be. It says, when Web 2 exploded in the late 2000s, Amazon Web Services was principally responsible for arming the rebels. They offered startups compute like EC2 and storage S3 in bite-sized pieces we could pay for with a credit card. As a result, 1,000 flowers bloomed. This will happen for AI compute clusters. And as it does, a few things should basically happen. For one, startups won't care what chips are used. And again, if you guys are into some of this terminology, you understand this. But A100, H100, Grok, etc. Number two, CUDA lock-in will be broken. Number three, foundational model diversity will emerge. If all gets basically sussed out, it's generally good for incumbent revenues, but generally bad for incumbent enterprise values, for example, like Cisco in the early 2000s. It's also very good for emerging disruptors like Grok Inc. Now, if you wonder who they are a US-based AI solutions company offering a kernel-less compiler and novel language processor built for ultra-fast inference at scale. If I know anything about it, some of this stuff, which I mean I do, if I don't know all of it, I know this much. To make a statement about something being kernel-less in an environment that's all about kernels, okay, if you know some of this terminology, that is game changer. He helped, of course, this company get off the ground 8 years ago. He's also one of their largest external shareholders. He expects startups like, excuse me, Grok Inc. to push the market aggressively towards super cheap transactions. They should show that they can drive massive throughout lowest relative cost. I said transactions, I mean tokens per second, excuse me. They should show that, yeah, they can drive, you know, with that relative low cost. The cloud providers will then do the rest. Now, this part about the cloud providers, I didn't have a chance to get more into this, but I guess you could say this is some of the juicy stuff. So we saw earlier on this outline about the whole thing of what Rndr has, you know, in regards to this partnership, if you will, to basic attention token, BAT. You know, another thing I would like to mention is how all these key players come together, if you will. And, you know, one of the key things I want to mention also is this part about the cloud providers. Like, why is that so significant? Well, if you think about this, I saw another piece and I wasn't able to verify it, but it specifically referenced Rndr and shout out to Tim Shea, and that is Flux. Now, we do know, based off of the material, that they got this thing going on with, you know, cloud storage and so on. I mean, obviously, if you're rendering, no pun intended, but rendering a lot of this, right? You're making clips, you're making videos. It could be a short clip, it could be a long video, whatever the case be. You do have to have some form of a storage provider. So Flux does make sense. Why would that make sense? Flux, compared to like what you saw also on the outline, compared to Amazon Web Services, is significantly like cheaper, like 90% or more cheaper. than going with, Google Cloud Services or Amazon Web Services, right? So I do think that, based off of what I saw, is a solid thing there. Right? I'm just going to go ahead. I hate to be speculative, but yeah, that makes sense. They definitely got something going on with Flux. Now, with that said, think about this for a second. Key partnerships with these alliances with, basic attention token, like it was shown before, obviously Flux and so on. What does that do for you as the token holder of like somebody like Tim Shea who holds Flux? Creates what? That much more supply and demand, because if you have a premier metaverse platform, which you do here, not platform, but what they provide to the metaverse, and boy, oh boy, apparently they provide something massive in regards to metaverse. Well, doesn't that create that much more demand for the asset of the storage solution of like Flux? So again, understanding partnerships that help fuel that drive of creating more supply and more demand for other particular digital assets that you hold, like Flux. So win-win all across the board. Let me know what you guys think in regards to all of this, in regards to Rndr. Do you feel as though it's solid? Is it a long-term hold for you? And if anything, when you educate maybe your kid, grandchildren, you name it, are you talking about boring BTC, or are you talking about something fun and exciting that they can connect to you with, for instance, what Rndr has going on? Let me know what you guys thought in regards to this introduction, and would you like us to cover more of Rndr?